Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. The federal government just announced their federal budget and a lot of spending towards new housing. I'm going to talk about how these policies are going to affect Vancouver real estate, not only today, but moving into the future. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people buy and sell real estate all across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you, or you wanted to chat about your real estate situation with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future weekly video. All right, spend, spend, spend. That is the nature of the federal budget that was just announced Tuesday of last week. Now, when it comes to housing, in this video, I'm going to focus, of course, on the housing elements and initiatives. One of the things that the federal government, the Liberals, did this time around a little bit differently is they've been going on a little bit of a national tour and releasing bits and pieces of their budget when it comes to housing over the last month or so. This is very different than showing up on budget day, slapping down the 400 plus page document in the budget. So they have been announcing some of these policies. Throughout this video, I will link to videos I've done previously, for example, on the Renters' Bill of Rights, and different changes that have already been announced. But let's talk about some of the major core pieces of this budget when it comes to housing. Overall, in terms of expenditures, we're looking at a federal government that's looking to spend over $50 billion. I will also talk about how they plan to recoup some of these expenses as well. But when we look at it from a housing perspective, there's two things that jump out to me in terms of big expenses and what they are going towards. And number one is rental housing construction nationally. So there is $15 billion put towards a program that already exists to offer low-cost loans for developers that are building rental housing construction. Now, they've had this in place, this program, I believe, since 2017, 2018. It has resulted in net new rental housing, but they're basically throwing more money at this and, again, incentivizing developers to build rental. Another kind of interesting piece, and again, they talked about this a couple weeks ago, is freeing up federally owned land and buildings and putting that towards housing. So this was it was interesting to see how they described this to be played out. So federal government, of course, they own land right across the country, and so what they're planning to do here is there's a lot of federally owned buildings, offices that are underutilized. A couple things. Generally, they would just sell this off or whatnot if it was underutilized, but they're going to start looking at ways where they can require more of a housing component if they do that. And in many instances, what they are going to do is actually lease out the land. So still own the land, but lease it out so that a developer can take it on at low cost and build and provide for more affordable type housing units. So a lot of the stuff actually that was mentioned in this federal budget, I should mention, aligns very much with the stuff that's been happening here in BC. So it's no secret that the federal government has taken some ideas from the NDP here and placed them into their budget. For instance, they also announced a secondary suite program. This is where they're going to offer low-cost loans to Canadians who want to create secondary suites in their home and rent it out below market. If you follow my channel, you know my thought process, what I think about that program, but that's another component of the federal budget. So we talked about, low-cost loans for rental housing construction. We talked about freeing up federally owned, underused building land, either by way of selling it or more likely actually holding on and leasing out that land for residential housing development. They're also talking about certain Crown corporations and Canada Post buildings, for instance, where they will add a housing component to them, still maintain the Canada Post, but have a housing component there. They've identified some properties already, including a location in North Van. Then they had what's called an infrastructure fund for the provinces. And this is very interesting because it's a $6 billion fund where the federal government is saying to the provinces, and a portion of that to the municipalities, If you follow certain criteria, that's going to eliminate red tape for developers, that's going to, for example, put a cap or a hold, a freeze on development fees for a period of time. If you are or if you are going to change your zoning bylaws like BC has done and allow for multiplexes, then and only then will we offer you a portion of this fund. So again, I just mentioned how a lot of these ideas come from BC and David Eby's government. So BC's, of course, fully on board with that. You have other provinces that are not really in it when it comes to, for example, multiplexes in all single family zones. Ontario not on board with it, so their funding will lack. They won't be getting that sort of funding from this infrastructure fund. So when I look at kind of the big picture, and I've been saying this for over a year and a half now, is that the focus for the federal government, the government does not care if you own your first home. If you're sitting here watching, you're a potential first-time buyer, they do not care. And I don't mean this from a negative standpoint. They don't mean this, they don't have ill will when I say that they don't care. It's that they cannot care. And so what the government has to focus on is rental housing construction predominantly. And then number two, again, what's happening in BC and federally is leasing out land for development. And there's the big Jericho Lands project that's happening in Vancouver, and that's all going to be what we call leasehold land, leasehold condos. So the difference with a leasehold, when you compare it to what we call a freehold condo, is with a leasehold, you don't own any portion of the land. So typically, because, you know, the investment in real estate, when you look at investors, and obviously BC, Canada, they want to take the investor out of real estate. The way to do that is to take the land value out of it. And that's what leasehold does. It basically keeps a bit of a cap on values. Now, leasehold properties, they do appreciate, but land is what appreciates the most. And these leasehold properties, the lease is for a defined period of time. So when you get towards the end of that lease, they tend to diminish in value because it's unknown whether that lease is going to get extended. Is the owner of the land going to want it back? So we have a focus on rentals. We have a focus on leaseholds, not owning anything. I mean, leasehold, yes, you own a portion of the building, but the building is a depreciating asset over time. So when I say the government doesn't care if you own your first home, again, they can't. They have to focus on making sure people have a roof over their head. And that's what this budget is doing. It's saying we just need roofs over people's heads. Now, they did do some stuff for first-time buyers, which, you know, was announced previously. 30-year amortization for first-time buyers that are buying new construction. So instead of the standard 25-year, it allows for your monthly payments to be lower. And so your, affordability is a bit better. You're now paying interest over a longer period of time. So you're paying more interest, but your buying power goes up. And so ultimately, when you look at programs like that, is that really designed to keep prices down? Or if you increase people's buying power, that will essentially push prices up. So if you're looking at this again from a buyer's standpoint, and you're wondering, what's going to happen with the market. And I always talk about real estate on this channel. You guys know this. I always talk about real estate from a long-term perspective. If we look at it over the long term and we see that all of this federal spending is going towards rentals, towards properties where people don't own the land, to these leaseholds, what does that tell you about the value of a freehold property? That freehold property, it's going to increase in value as developers build more rentals, they build more leaseholds. So over a long-term horizon, I think with all of the priority put to other types of products, that freehold property is going to become more coveted, and ultimately it's going to increase the value over time. Again, I've said it on my channel before, but last year, a down year, the freehold condo went up about 5% on average in a down year with interest rates where they're at. And so I think, if you're sitting on the fence, do your own homework, take a look, see whether you can afford the payments. It is widely expected that there will be a rate cut sometime this year. I'm not sure it comes as early as June, but the Bank of Canada has pretty much indicated they're done with increasing rates. They will hold on where we're at, 5%, for as long as they need to until they see core inflation continue to come down, and it's been making that progress. But for you as a buyer, just if you can afford the payments, if you're comfortable in your work scenario, you have some security there. I think there's opportunity, especially in the condo segment. So we're seeing a couple of things. We're seeing a lot of new listings in downtown Vancouver area. These are former Airbnb properties where either the seller is thinking of going into the long-term rental market with the units, or they're thinking of selling, and many are actually placing it on the market to sell. So we're seeing increased inventory. If you are a buyer or a seller in this market or any market, your success is determined on the same thing, but just from either side of it. It's not interest rates. When we see an interest rate cut, let's be realistic about it. We're probably going to see a 0.25% cut. That's not enough to change people's buying power so significantly that we're going to see this influx in value. But what it does do is it adds a little fuel to the fire, because there's going to be some positive headlines, right? The first cut in such and such time. There's going to be all of these kind of positive types of headlines that are going to fuel the market. So that adds some fuel. But your success is determined on the exact same thing. As a seller, it's when you list your property, is it show ready? How well are you priced? And really what it comes down to is how many properties are you up against that are also active on the market. It's an inventory play. So if you list your property and it just happens to be a time period where a bunch of the units in your neighborhood have sold off and you're up against fewer competition, you're going to do very well. So it's an inventory thing. From a buyer perspective, like I said, it's the same thing, but from the other side. But success as a buyer, and I notice this with my clients, is where we find the best deals are my clients that are not particular to one specific neighborhood. Because the more that you expand your horizon, the more that you're open to more neighborhoods, the more product you have to choose from, and you're able to find the better deals. Whereas if you come to me as a real estate agent, or your real estate agent, and you say, look, I have to be in this little pocket, A, you're probably waiting a long time to get that property. B, when it comes up, you're competing with a lot more people that have that same mindset. So if you're more flexible with where you can go, especially in that condo segment right now, there's a lot of options out there. You're able to write with subjects. Just did that with a client on an investment property where we got longer than your typical subject removal period on an entry-level price. So it's out there. There's options out there. And again, when that cut does come, it's not going to create a mad frenzy, but it will get busier. People, our market is driven by sentiment, right? When people feel good, when they feel positive, when they see a pathway to rates coming down over a longer period of time, that's going to get more activity happening. So keep that in mind when it comes to real estate in the short term. If you're looking to make a short-term move, and based on what we talked about federal budget-wise in terms of their priorities with rentals and leaseholds, think about what that will do for value of a freehold strata condo property over the long term. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And again, if you're in the Vancouver area or the Fraser Valley, you want to talk to me about real estate, you can book me for a free call, or you can just send me a text. Give me a call, shoot me an email. All my contact info is in the description box below. But I want to thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.